What happens when a joke goes too far, and my laughter strips the last bit of dignity from our home? How did my husband, so calm and quiet, turn my harmless fun into lawful consequences that no one, not even me, saw coming? I used to think I could talk my way out of anything, but today I opened the door and found the evidence stacked against me, with my name on every line. The music at Jasper's bar was loud enough to drown out my conscience, which was exactly what I needed. At 34, I was tired of being the responsible wife who went to bed early and worried about what people thought. Tonight, I was reclaiming my youth, my independence, my right to have fun without asking permission. "Evadne, you look incredible," Jasper Lowe called out as I walked through the crowded bar. His voice carried that familiar confidence that had always made him the center of attention back in college. Now, as the bar's manager, he commanded the room with the same magnetic energy that had once made both Caleb and me compete for his friendship. I dressed carefully for tonight, a black dress that hugged in all the right places, heels that clicked with authority, makeup that said, "Notice me." Caleb had barely looked up from his stack of student papers when I'd announced I was going out. His indifference stung more than I cared to admit. "Thanks, Jazz." "You know how to make a girl feel special," I replied, accepting the drink he offered. The liquid courage burned pleasantly as it went down. The evening progressed in a haze of laughter, music, and increasingly bold conversation. Jasper had a way of making everyone feel like they were part of something exclusive, something rebellious. When he suggested we take photos for social media, I didn't hesitate. "Come on, Ivy," he said, using the nickname that made me feel 22 again. "Show them what they're missing." That's when it happened. As I posed for the camera, Jasper's hand came down in a playful slap across my backside. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot, and the entire bar erupted in laughter and cheers. Instead of being offended, I found myself laughing harder than anyone else. "Did you just—" I gasped between giggles. "Guilty as charged," Jasper grinned, his arm sliding around my waist for the next photo. "What can I say? Some things never change." The photographer captured it all: my delighted expression, Jasper's triumphant grin, the crowd's obvious approval. In that moment, I felt more alive than I had in years. This was what I'd been missing, trapped in my suburban bubble, with a husband who treated excitement like a contagious disease. I tagged everyone in the photos before I even left the bar, adding captions like, "Still got it, eat you queen, energy, no regrets." The likes and comments started pouring in immediately, feeding something hungry inside me that I hadn't even realized was starving. By the time I arrived home, it was nearly 2 a.m. Caleb was sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, a cup of cold coffee in front of him. His dark hair was disheveled, and his usually kind brown eyes looked hollow. "Have fun?" he asked quietly. "Amazing fun," I replied, kicking off my heels with deliberate drama. "You should have come, though I know how you feel about anything that involves actual enjoyment." "I saw the photos." The words hung in the air like an accusation. I felt a flicker of something, guilt, embarrassment, but pushed it down with practiced ease. "Oh, those. Jasper was just being Jasper. You know how he is." "I know how he is," Caleb repeated slowly. "What I'm trying to figure out is how you are." I rolled my eyes, already marshalling my defenses. "Don't be so dramatic, Caleb. It was harmless fun. You're acting like I committed some terrible crime." "Harmless?" His voice cracked slightly. "Evadne, half our friends saw those photos. My colleagues, your family. So what? I'm not allowed to have friends. I'm not allowed to laugh. God, Caleb, when did you become such a prude?" He stood up slowly, his movements careful and controlled. "When did you stop caring about us?" The question hit harder than I expected, but I deflected with the skill of someone who'd been avoiding uncomfortable truths for years. "This isn't about us, Caleb. This is about you being jealous that I have a life outside of grading papers and watching documentaries about ancient Rome." Is that what you think this is? I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill because you can't stand to see me happy. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. The hurt was still there, but it was hardening into something else, something that made my stomach twist uneasily. I'm going to bed, he said finally. Caleb, wait. But he was already walking away, his shoulders rigid with suppressed emotion. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the quiet click of the guest room door. The guest room. When had my husband started sleeping in the guest room? I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled through the responses to my photos. The validation was intoxicating. Dozens of fire emojis, comments about how stunning and confident I looked, messages from old friends saying they wished they had my courage. See, I told myself, this is what normal people think. Caleb's just uptight. But as I climbed the stairs to our empty bedroom, I noticed something that made me pause. There was a small silver key on Caleb's dresser that I didn't recognize. When I tried the drawers, I found that one of them, the bottom drawer that used to hold his old college textbooks, was now locked. I told myself it was probably just important documents or tax papers, nothing to worry about. But as I lay alone in our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the image of Caleb's face when he'd said, "When did you stop caring about us?" The answer, if I was being honest, was that I'd never stopped caring. I'd just stopped believing that what we had was enough. Monday morning brought reality crashing back like a hangover. I'd barely settled at my desk at the marketing firm when my phone started buzzing with notifications. The party photos had been shared and reshared across multiple social media platforms, gathering momentum like a runaway train. "Looking good, Ivy," commented my sister Lynn, though I detected a note of concern beneath the supportive emoji. "Get it, girl," wrote my mother, Roxana, with her typical disregard for consequences. But it was the private message from my boss, Harold, that made my stomach drop. "Need to see you in my office." 9:30. I spent the next hour refreshing my social media feeds, watching the likes climb higher. Each notification felt like a small victory, proof that I was living authentically while everyone else played it safe. When colleagues walked past my cubicle, I caught them glancing at their phones and then at me, their expressions unreadable. At 9:30 sharp, I knocked on Harold's glass-walled office. He gestured for me to sit down without looking up from his computer screen. "Evadne, I'm going to be direct with you," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "We received a complaint this morning about your social media presence." "A complaint?" I kept my voice steady, professional. "From whom?" "The Riverside Community Bank account. Apparently, Mrs. Patterson saw your weekend photos and felt they were inconsistent with our company values." Heat flooded my cheeks. "My personal life has nothing to do with my work performance, Harold. You know my numbers are solid." "Your numbers are excellent," he agreed. "But in this business, perception matters. Our clients trust us to represent their brands with discretion and professionalism. So I'm supposed to live like a nun because some uptight client can't handle seeing a woman enjoy herself?" Harold sighed, removing his glasses to clean them, a gesture I'd learned meant he was choosing his words carefully. "I'm not telling you how to live your life, Evadne. I'm asking you to consider how your online presence reflects on this company. Maybe adjust your privacy settings, or think twice before tagging your workplace in party photos." The meeting ended with a verbal warning, disguised as friendly advice, but the message was clear: tone it down or face consequences. I spent my lunch break in my car, calling my mother for support. "Oh, honey," Roxana laughed when I told her about Harold's concerns. "Men are so threatened by confident women. You keep being yourself. If Caleb and your boss can't handle a strong, independent woman, that's their problem." But when I called Lynn, her response was different. "Ivy, I love you, but maybe you should listen to what people are trying to tell you. That photo, it looked like something more than just friends having fun." "It was friends having fun, Lynn. Why is everyone acting like I committed adultery? Because, she paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. Because married women don't usually look that happy when other men touch them. The conversation ended awkwardly, leaving me feeling more isolated than validated. That evening, I came home to find Caleb in the kitchen, methodically preparing dinner for one. He'd always been a creature of habit, but there was something different about his movements, more precise, more deliberate. Making enough for two? I asked, trying to inject some lightness into the tension. I wasn't sure if you'd be home. The words stung because they were delivered without malice, just matter-of-fact observation. Caleb, we need to talk about this morning. I think you're overreacting to— I'm not reacting to anything, he interrupted quietly. I'm observing. Observing what? He turned to face me, and I was struck by how calm he looked. The hurt from Saturday night had been replaced by something that looked almost like scientific curiosity. I'm observing that my wife posted photos of another man touching her intimately, tagged our entire social circle, and seems genuinely confused about why that might be problematic. Intimately? Caleb, it was a playful slap on the— I know what it was, Evadne. I also know how you reacted to it. The way he said my full name, not Ivy, not Honey, but Evadne, sent a chill through me. How I reacted? I laughed. Since when is laughter a crime? Since it became more important to you than your marriage. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but something in his tone made me pause. This wasn't the emotional, hurt Caleb from Saturday night. This was someone else entirely. Someone calculating and controlled. I'm going upstairs, I said finally. Your dinner's in the microwave, he replied, already turning back to his meal. Later that night, I discovered that my laptop had been moved. It was still in the study, but positioned differently on the desk. When I opened it, I found that someone had been looking at my browser history. All my social media accounts, my photo uploads, even my private messages. The violation should have made me angry, but instead, it made me afraid. I confronted Caleb the next morning as he was getting ready for school. Did you go through my laptop? Did you give me a reason to? Another non-answer that somehow felt like a complete confession. Caleb, this is insane. You're acting like I'm having an affair. He paused in knotting his tie, meeting my eyes in the bathroom mirror. Are you? The question hung between us like a blade. I wanted to say no immediately, emphatically, but something made me hesitate. Was I? Nothing physical had happened with Jasper, but there had been text messages, late-night conversations, a growing emotional intimacy that I'd been careful not to examine too closely. Of course not, I said finally. Then you won't mind if I keep observing. He left for work without kissing me goodbye, a small omission that somehow felt monumental. That afternoon, I discovered that the bottom drawer of his dresser wasn't the only thing that had been locked. There was now a filing cabinet in the study that I'd never seen before, and when I tried to open Caleb's laptop, I found it was password protected. When had my husband become a stranger in my own home? Sunday dinner at the Hartley family home had always been a command performance, but this week it felt like walking into a tribunal. Eleanor, Caleb's mother, greeted me with her usual warm hug, but I caught the worried glance she exchanged with her husband Richard over my head. Evadne, dear, you look lovely, she said, though her smile seemed strained. Richard's greeting was notably cooler. Caleb's father had always been formal with me, but today his handshake felt like a business transaction, brief and impersonal. It was Lydia, Caleb's 28-year-old sister, who cut straight to the heart of the matter. So, Ivy, she said, settling into her chair across from me with the predatory grace of someone who'd been sharpening her claws all week. Interesting photos from last weekend. Lydia, Eleanor warned, but her daughter was already in full attack mode. What? I'm just saying it's nice to see Ivy making new friends. Or should I say, renewing old friendships? Caleb, who had been quietly helping his mother set the table, finally spoke up. Lydia, drop it. Drop it? Caleb, she humiliated you in front of half the town, and you want me to drop it? The room fell silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. I felt every eye on me, waiting for my response. I didn't humiliate anyone, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I went to a party with friends. Since when is that a crime? Since you're married, Richard said quietly, his words carrying the weight of absolute authority. Excuse me? You heard me. Marriage means something in this family. It means loyalty, respect, discretion. What you did last weekend was none of those things. Heat flooded my cheeks. What I did was have fun with an old friend. If you want to turn that into something sordid, that's your choice, but don't project your outdated values onto my marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor looked stricken, Richard's jaw was set in granite, and Lydia was staring at me like I'd just slapped her mother. It was Caleb who broke the tension, his voice unnaturally calm. We should go. Caleb, no, Eleanor protested. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out, Mom. Evadne has made her position clear. On the drive home, the silence in the car was suffocating. I tried several times to start a conversation, but Caleb's responses were monosyllabic. When we pulled into our driveway, he finally spoke. I'm going back to school tonight. I have papers to grade. It's Sunday evening, Caleb. I have a lot of papers to grade. I watched him drive away, feeling more alone than I had since the whole mess started. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I called Jasper. Ivy, I was just thinking about you. How's married life treating you? Like a prison sentence, I said, surprising myself with my honesty. Rough week. You could say that. Listen, are you doing anything tonight? I could use some friendly company. There was a pause, and I could almost hear him grinning through the phone. As a matter of fact, I'm having a few people over. Nothing crazy, just some wine and good conversation. You should come. I should have said no. I should have stayed home, called Caleb, apologized to his family, tried to repair the damage I'd already done. Instead, I found myself changing into my favorite dress and driving across town to Jasper's apartment. The gathering was smaller than the party at the bar, more intimate. Jasper had always been good at creating an atmosphere where people felt special, chosen, part of something exclusive. As the evening progressed and the wine flowed, I felt the stress of the past week melting away. You know what your problem is, Ivy, Jasper said as we stood on his balcony, looking out over the city lights. You married a boy instead of a man. Caleb's not a boy. Isn't he? A real man would fight for his woman. He'd mark his territory, show the world what he had. Instead, he's sulking like a teenager who got his Xbox taken away. His words were like poison wrapped in silk, appealing to every doubt and frustration I'd been harboring. Maybe you're right, I heard myself saying. I know I'm right. You deserve someone who appreciates your fire, not someone who tries to smother it. When he leaned in to kiss me, I didn't pull away. The photo someone took of us on that balcony, Jasper's arms around me, our faces inches apart, the city sparkling behind us like a romantic movie backdrop, was posted to social media before I even got home. This time, there was no ambiguity, no way to explain it away as innocent fun. I found Caleb waiting for me in the study, surrounded by manila folders and what looked like printed emails. His laptop was open, displaying a spreadsheet that seemed to contain dates, times, and social media screenshots. Working late? I asked, trying to inject some normalcy into the surreal scene. You could say that. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where I used to sit when he helped me with my taxes or insurance paperwork. Now it felt like the defendant's seat in a courtroom. Caleb, about tonight, about last weekend, about the past 6 months of text messages and private calls and late-night work meetings that somehow always coincide with Jasper's schedule. My blood turned to ice. I've been documenting my wife's affair. The word hit me like a physical blow. It's not an affair. We haven't what? Haven't had sex. Is that the line you're drawing? Because from where I sit, you've been emotionally unfaithful for months, and tonight you crossed into physical territory. I wanted to deny it, to explain that it was just a kiss, that it didn't mean anything, but the words died in my throat. Because looking at the evidence spread across his desk, screenshots of flirty text messages, credit card statements showing lunches and drinks I'd claimed were work meetings, even a timeline of my social media activity, I realized that my husband had been building a case against me with the methodical precision of a prosecutor. "When did you become this person?" I whispered. "When did you?" He closed the laptop and stood up, gathering the folders with practiced efficiency. "This isn't funny anymore, Ivadne. It stopped being funny the moment you chose to humiliate me publicly rather than address whatever's broken in our marriage privately. Caleb, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend you didn't spend tonight kissing another man? Pretend you haven't been lying to me for months? Pretend that you haven't made it clear that you'd rather be anywhere but married to me?" He was right, and we both knew it, but admitting that would mean accepting responsibility for the destruction I'd caused, and I wasn't ready for that. "You're being dramatic," I said instead. "People make mistakes. People have rough patches. That doesn't mean we throw away 8 years of marriage." "You're right," he said, and for a moment I felt a surge of hope. People do make mistakes, but mistakes are accidents, Ivadne. What you've been doing is a choice, a series of choices, each one designed to hurt me and our marriage. He walked past me toward the door, then paused. "I'll be staying at my parents' house for a few days. I think we both need some space to figure out what we want." "Caleb, wait." But he was already gone, leaving me alone in the study surrounded by the evidence of my betrayal. Later that night, I found a USB drive taped under one of the tax folders, labeled Archive A, in Caleb's careful handwriting. When I plugged it into my laptop, I found copies of everything, every text message, every photo, every receipt, every lie I'd told organized into neat digital folders. My husband wasn't just documenting my affair, he was building a fortress of evidence that would be impossible to tear down. The next few days passed in a haze of professional humiliation and social isolation. Word of the balcony photo had spread through our social circle like wildfire, and suddenly I found myself on the wrong side of every conversation. At work, colleagues who had once invited me to lunch now avoided eye contact. The marketing team's group chat, which had always included me, seemed to go silent whenever I was around. Even Harold, who had always been supportive of my career ambitions, began assigning my accounts to other team members. "Just temporarily," he explained when I confronted him, "until things settle down." "Things? What things? My personal life has nothing to do with my professional capabilities." "Ivadne, the Patterson account specifically requested a different account manager. The Morrison Group is asking questions about our company culture. I'm trying to protect you here, but you're not making it easy." I wanted to fight back, to demand my rights, to threaten legal action for discrimination. But deep down, I knew that Harold was right. My personal choices had professional consequences, and no amount of indignation could change that. My family wasn't offering much support either. When I called my mother for sympathy, her response was characteristically self-centered. "Oh, honey, men are so dramatic about these things. Caleb will get over it. He's too boring to find anyone else anyway." "Mum, that's not helpful." "What? I'm just saying you're the best thing that ever happened to him. He should be grateful you're willing to work on the marriage." But Lynn's call later that day told a different story. "Ivy, I love you, but you need to know that people are talking. Not just about the photos, but about other things." "What other things?" "The lunch meetings with Jasper that you told me were work meetings. The new clothes, the way you've been acting lately. People aren't stupid, Ivy. They can see what's happening." "Nothing's happening. Why is everyone so determined to turn this into something it's not?" Because it is something, Ivy. Maybe you can't see it, or maybe you don't want to see it, but you're having an emotional affair. And now it's becoming physical. One kiss doesn't make it physical. One kiss that you know about. The implication hung in the air like an accusation. Lynn was suggesting that there had been more, that my own sister didn't believe my version of events. I can't believe you're taking his side, I said. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm trying to save your marriage before you destroy it completely. But it was my conversation with Jasper that really opened my eyes to how isolated I'd become. Ivy, babe, you sound stressed, he said when I called him that Thursday evening. I am stressed. My whole life is falling apart. Hey, that's what happens when you break free from a cage. There's always going to be turbulence before you find your wings. This isn't turbulence, Jasper. This is my husband building a legal case against me. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly. A legal case? What kind of legal case? Divorce, I think. He's been documenting everything. Photos, messages, receipts. It's like he's been planning this for months. Wow, that's intense. Intense? That's all you have to say? Jasper, if he files for divorce and claims adultery, it could affect everything. My job, my finances, my reputation. Look, Ivy, I care about you, but I can't get involved in your marriage drama. I thought we were just having fun. The words hit me like a slap. Just having fun. That's all I was to him. Entertainment, a diversion, someone else's wife who was willing to play games. Just having fun, I repeated. Come on, you knew what this was. You're married, I'm single, we have chemistry. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It became complicated the moment you encouraged me to post those photos. It became complicated when you kissed me knowing full well that my marriage was falling apart. I didn't encourage anything, Ivy. You made your own choices, and as for the kiss, you didn't exactly fight me off. The conversation ended with me hanging up on him, feeling more alone than I had since the whole nightmare began. That night, I came home to find evidence of Caleb's continued surveillance. The printer in the study had been running. I could smell the warm toner and see fresh paper in the output tray. There were new folders on his desk, labeled with dates and legal terminology I didn't understand. In the kitchen, I found a note written in his careful handwriting. Monday, downtown, 9:45 a.m. My hands shook as I read it. Monday was 3 days away. Whatever Caleb was planning, it was happening soon. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I drove to his parents' house, but Eleanor answered the door with an expression of polite regret. I'm sorry, Evadne, but Caleb doesn't want to see you right now. Eleanor, please. I just need 5 minutes to explain. Explain what, dear? That you've been carrying on with another man? That you've humiliated my son in front of the entire community? That you've shown more affection for Jasper Lowe in 2 weeks than you've shown for your husband in 2 years? The words were delivered with Eleanor's characteristic gentleness, but they cut deeper than any screaming match could have. That's not fair, I whispered. Isn't it? Evadne, I've watched you pull away from Caleb for months. I've seen you roll your eyes when he talks, dismiss his interests, treat him like he's boring and beneath you. The affair might have been the final straw, but it wasn't the beginning of the problem. She was right, and I hated her for it. What's he planning for Monday? I asked. I think you know what he's planning. Eleanor, please. I know I've made mistakes, but 8 years of marriage has to count for something. It does count for something. It counts as 8 years of evidence that you never really wanted to be married to him. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing on the porch like a stranger. That weekend, I tried desperately to regain control of the narrative. I deleted the compromising photos from my social media accounts, though I knew Caleb had already saved copies. I drafted a dozen different text messages to him, ranging from defiant to apologetic, but sent none of them. On Sunday night, I heard the printer running again. This time, When I went to investigate, I found a new shared folder on our home computer, labeled Archive Final. It contained everything, every photo, every text message, every receipt, every lie I'd told, all organized chronologically with timestamps and cross-references. It was a masterpiece of methodical documentation, the kind of evidence that would be impossible to refute or explain away. At the bottom of the folder was a document titled Timeline of Marital Breakdown, which detailed not just my affair with Jasper, but months of emotional distance, disrespect, and betrayal that I'd thought had gone unnoticed. Reading it was like seeing myself through someone else's eyes, someone who had been watching, recording, and quietly building a case while I'd been too self-absorbed to notice. Monday morning arrived grey and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I called in sick to work, unable to face another day of whispered conversations and pointed stares. At 9:30 a.m., I heard a car door slam in my driveway. At 9:35, there was a knock at my front door. At 9:45, exactly as Caleb's note had predicted, I found myself face to face with a process server holding a thick manila envelope with my name on it. The process server was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that somehow made the moment even more surreal. Evadne Hartley? Yes. I have some documents for you. Please sign here. My hand shook as I signed the receipt, accepting the envelope that would change everything. The woman offered a sympathetic smile before walking back to her car, leaving me standing in my doorway, holding the evidence of my marriage's destruction. Inside the envelope were 3 sets of documents, each more devastating than the last. The first was a petition for divorce, citing adultery and irreconcilable differences, in language so clinical it made my betrayal sound like a business transaction. Caleb was requesting an equitable division of assets, spousal support limitations based on my voluntary marital misconduct, and a restraining order preventing me from accessing certain shared accounts pending the outcome of the proceedings. The second set of documents was a temporary order, signed by a judge I'd never heard of, granting Caleb exclusive use of our joint checking account and requiring me to stay away from his workplace and family home. It was effective immediately, but it was the third set of documents that truly took my breath away. Exhibit A, evidence of adultery and marital misconduct, contained everything I'd seen in the shared folder and more. Photos I didn't even remember taking. Text messages I'd thought were private, credit card statements showing a pattern of deception that stretched back months. There were witness statements from colleagues who had seen me having lunch with Jasper, from neighbors who had noticed his car in my driveway when Caleb was at work, from family members who had watched our marriage deteriorate in real time. Most damning of all was a statement from Jasper himself, distancing himself from any serious romantic involvement and characterizing our relationship as casual flirtation that Mrs. Hartley may have misinterpreted. The betrayal was breathtaking. While I'd been fantasizing about a future with him, Jasper had been protecting himself legally, making sure that when the inevitable collapse came, he would emerge unscathed. I was still standing in my entryway, papers scattered around me like fallen leaves, when I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Caleb was sitting behind the wheel, watching me with the same calm expression he'd worn for the past 2 weeks. Our eyes met through the windshield, and I saw something in his face that I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but a kind of peaceful resolution that was somehow more frightening than any emotional outburst would have been. I walked across the street in my pajamas, not caring who might see me. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked when he rolled down his window. "Since the first time you lied to me about meeting Jasper for lunch," he replied calmly. "That was 6 months ago, in case you've forgotten." 6 months? Caleb, you've been building a case against me for 6 months? I've been documenting the end of our marriage for 6 months. There's a difference. I don't understand. If you knew what was happening, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you fight for us? He turned to look at me fully, and I saw something that might have been pity in his expression. Evadne, I tried to fight for us for years. Every time you rolled your eyes when I talked about my day, every time you forgot about plans we'd made, every time you made it clear that being married to me was some kind of burden you were nobly bearing. That's not what? True? Fair? The affair with Jasper wasn't the beginning of the end, Evadne. It was just the proof I needed that you'd already checked out of our marriage emotionally. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that marriages go through rough patches, and that didn't justify his calculated revenge. But looking at the evidence in my hands, I realized that what I'd been calling a rough patch, he'd been experiencing as systematic emotional abuse. So what happens now? I asked. Now you hire a lawyer, and we get divorced like civilized adults. Or you contest it, and we air all of this in open court. Your choice. Caleb, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend you didn't spend 6 months lying to me. Pretend you didn't humiliate me in front of our entire community. Pretend you didn't choose another man over your husband repeatedly and systematically. He started the car, and I realized he was about to drive away from our conversation, from our marriage, from 8 years of shared history. I never meant for it to go this far, I said desperately. I know, he replied, and there was genuine sadness in his voice. That's what makes it worse. You destroyed our marriage without even realizing you were doing it. Caleb, wait. But he was already pulling away from the curb, leaving me standing in the street in my pajamas, holding the legal documents that would unravel my life. That afternoon, I called every lawyer in town, but word of the divorce had already spread. The evidence against me was so overwhelming that most attorneys suggested I accept whatever settlement Caleb offered, rather than fight a battle I couldn't win. Mrs. Hartley, said the one lawyer who agreed to meet with me, your husband has built an airtight case. Photos, messages, witness statements, financial records showing a pattern of deception. If this goes to trial, it's going to be a bloodbath. But I never actually slept with Jasper, I protested. That's irrelevant. In this state, emotional adultery is grounds for divorce, and the evidence shows systematic betrayal over an extended period. Add in the public humiliation factor, and you're looking at a very unfavorable settlement. What does that mean? It means you'll be lucky to walk away with half of anything. Your husband is a public school teacher with a spotless reputation. You're a marketing executive who's been publicly carrying on with another man. Guess who the judge is going to sympathize with? I left the lawyer's office feeling like I was drowning. In less than 2 weeks, I'd gone from being a confident, independent woman to being a cautionary tale about the consequences of selfish choices. That evening, I found one final surprise waiting for me at home. Caleb had returned while I was out, and he'd left a single sheet of paper on the kitchen counter. It was a handwritten note in his careful script. Evadne, I want you to know that I never wanted it to end this way. For years, I hoped that the woman I fell in love with would come back. I made excuses for your behavior, blamed myself for your unhappiness, tried to be better, more interesting, more worthy of your attention. It took me too long to realize that the problem wasn't that I wasn't enough for you. It was that you didn't want to be married to anyone. You wanted to be single while enjoying the security of marriage, and that's not fair to either of us. I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't revenge. It's just the natural consequence of choices you made freely and repeatedly. I wish you well, but I won't pretend anymore that we have a future together. Caleb. Reading those words, I finally understood what I'd lost. Not just a husband, but a man who had loved me enough to document my betrayal meticulously. Not out of cruelty, but out of a desperate hope that someday I would care enough about our marriage to stop destroying it. But by the time I realized what I'd thrown away, it was too late to get it back. 3 weeks later, I sat in my car outside the house that was no longer mine, watching strangers carry boxes out the front door. The divorce had been finalized with brutal efficiency. Caleb's evidence had been so overwhelming that my lawyer had advised me to accept his settlement offer rather than risk losing everything in court. I'd kept my job, barely, after agreeing to a demotion and a transfer to our satellite office across town. My social circle had evaporated, my family relationships were strained, and my reputation was in ruins. The woman who had once prided herself on being able to talk her way out of anything had discovered that some consequences can't be charmed away. The final irony came when I tried to reach out to Jasper, hoping to salvage something from the wreckage of my marriage. His response was a brief text message. "Sorry, Ivy, things got too complicated. Hope you understand." He'd moved on to his next conquest without a backward glance, leaving me to face the consequences of our harmless fun alone. As I drove away from my former home for the last time, I thought about the question that had started this whole nightmare. What happens when a joke goes too far? I'd learned the answer the hard way, when laughter becomes more important than loyalty, when validation matters more than vows, when the thrill of rebellion outweighs the value of commitment, the joke stops being funny and becomes a tragedy. Caleb had been right about one thing. This wasn't revenge. It was just the natural consequence of choices I'd made freely and repeatedly, documented with the methodical precision of a man who had loved me enough to give me every opportunity to choose differently. I'd chosen poorly, and now I was living with the results. The most painful part wasn't the divorce, or the financial settlement, or even the public humiliation. It was the knowledge that I'd destroyed something real and valuable for something that had never existed outside my own imagination. Caleb had offered me 8 years of steady love, loyalty, and partnership. In return, I'd given him betrayal, humiliation, and contempt, all while telling myself I was just having harmless fun. Now I was free to live the independent, exciting life I'd thought I wanted. The only problem was discovering that freedom without love, excitement without security, and independence without partnership felt a lot like loneliness. As I pulled into the parking lot of my new apartment complex, a generic building full of other people starting over after their own disasters, I realized that Caleb had given me exactly what I'd been asking for all along. I just hadn't been smart enough to realize I didn't actually want it. The joke was over, and I was the only one left laughing, but there was no humor left in it anymore. In the end, I learned that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. Some trust, once broken, can never be repaired. And some consequences, once set in motion, can't be stopped by explanations, apologies, or tears. My husband's lawful revenge wasn't cruel or vindictive, it was simply accurate. He'd held up a mirror to my choices and forced me to see what I'd become. The woman staring back wasn't someone I recognized, but she was someone I'd created through 1,000 small betrayals disguised as harmless fun. The laughter had finally stopped, and in the silence that followed, I could hear the echo of everything I'd lost.